There we go. Professor Von Dusen's Problems by Jacques Futrelle. Number 6. The Stolen Banknotes. There was no mystery whatever about the identity of the man who, alone and unaided, robbed the 13th National Bank of $109,473 in cash and $1.29 in postage stamps. It was Mort Dolan, the expert safecracker, albeit a young one, and he had made a clean sweep. Nor yet was there any mystery about his whereabouts. He was safely in a cell at the police headquarters, having been captured within less than 12 hours after the robbery was discovered. Dolan had offered no resistance to the officers when he was cornered, and had attempted no denial when questioned by Detective Mallory. He knew he had been caught fairly and squarely, and no argument was possible. So he confessed with the glow of pride at a job well done. It was 4 or 5 days after his arrest that the matter came to the attention of Professor Von Dusen. Then the problem was, well, but perhaps it were better to begin at the beginning. Despite the fact that he was considerably less than 30 years old, Mort Dolan was a man for whom the police had a wholesome respect. He had a record, for he had only started early. This robbery of the 13th National Bank was his big job, and was to have been his last. With the proceeds, he had intended to take his wife and quietly disappear beneath a full beard and an alias in some place far removed from his former haunts. But the mutability of human events is a matter of proverb. While the robbery as a robbery was a thoroughly artistic piece of work, and in full accordance with the plans which had been worked out to the minutest detail months before, he had made one mistake. This was leaving behind him in the bank the can in which the nitroglycerin had been brought. Throughout his carelessness, he had been traced. Dolan and his wife occupied 3 poor rooms in a poor tenement house. From the moment the police got a description of the person who bought the explosive, they were confident, for they knew their man. Therefore, 4 clever detectives were on the watch about the poor tenement. Neither Dolan nor his wife was there when they arrived, but from the condition of things in the rooms, the police believed that they had intended to return, so they took up their positions hopefully. Unsuspecting enough, for his one mistake in the robbery had not recurred to him, Dolan came along just about dusk and started up the 5 steps in front of the door of the tenement. It just happened that he glanced back and saw a head suddenly behind the projecting pillar. But the electric light glared strongly there, and Dolan recognized Detective Downey, one of the many men who revolved around Detective Mallory within a limited orbit. Now Dolan did not start nor do anything foolish. He paused a moment and rolled a cigarette while he thought it over. Perhaps instead of entering, it would be best to stroll on down the street, turn a corner, and make a dash for it. But just at that moment he spied another head in the direction of contemplated flight. That was Detective Blanton. Deeply thoughtful, Dolan smoked half the cigarette and stared blankly in front of him. He knew of a back door opening to an alley. Perhaps the detectives had not thought to guard that. He tossed his cigarette away and entered the house with affected unconcern, and closed the unclean hall which extended the full length of the building. He flung open the back door. He turned back instantly. Just outside, he had seen and recognized Detective Cunningham. Then he had an inspiration. The roof. The building was 4 stories. He ran up the 4 flats, but rapidly, and was halfway up to the last, which led to the opening to the roof, when he stopped. From above he caught the whiff of a bad cigar, then the measured tread of heavy boots. Another detective. With a sickening depression at his heart, Dolan came softly down the stairs again, opened the door of his flat with the latchkey, and entered. Then and there he sat down to figure it all out. There seemed no escape for him. Every way out was blocked, and it was only a question of time before they would choose to close in on him. He imagined now that they were only waiting for his wife's return. He could fight for his freedom, of course, even kill one, perhaps two, of the detectives who were waiting for him. But that would only mean his own death. If he tried to run, for just past either of the detectives, he would get a shot in the back. Besides, murder was repugnant to Dolan's artistic soul. It did not do any good, but he could warn his wife Isabel. He feared that she would walk into the trap as he had done, and she had had no connection of any sort to the affair. Then, from a fear that his wife would return, there swiftly came a fear that she would not. He suddenly remembered that it was necessary for him to see her. The police could not connect her with the robbery in any way. They could only hold her for a time, and then would be compelled to free her, for her innocence in this particular crime was beyond question. And if he were taken before she returned, she would be left penniless. And that was a thing which Dolan dreaded to contemplate. There was a spark of human tenderness in his heart, and in prison it would be comforting to know that she was well cared for. If she would only come now, he could tell her where the money... For 10 minutes, Dolan considered the question in all possible lights. A letter telling her where the money was? No, it would inevitably fall into the hands of the police. A cipher? She would never get it. How? 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 Every moment he expected a clamor at the door, which would mean that the police would come for him. They knew he was cornered. Whatever he did must be done quickly. Dolan took a long breath and started to roll another cigarette. With the thin white paper held in his left hand and the tobacco pouch raised in the other, he had an inspiration. For a little more than an hour after that, he was left alone. Finally, his quick ear caught the shuffle of stealthy feet in the hall. Then came an imperative rap at the door. The police were evidently feared to wait longer. Dolan was leaning against the sewing machine when the summons came. Instinctively, his hand closed in his revolver. Then he tossed it aside and walked to the door. "Well?" he demanded. "Listen, Dolan," came the reply. "That you, Downey?" Dolan inquired. "Yes. Now don't make any mistakes, Mort. There are 3 of us here, and the Cunningham is in the alley watching your window. There's no way out." For one instant, only an instant, Dolan hesitated. It was not that he feared prison, it was a regret at being caught. He had planned it all so differently, and the little woman would be heartbroken. Finally, with a quick backward glance to the sewing machine, he opened the door. 3 revolvers were thrust in his face with a unanimity that spoke well for the police opinion of the man. Dolan promptly raised his hands over his head. "Oh, put down your guns," he expostulated. "I'm not crazy. My gun is over there on the couch." Detective Downey, by a personal search, corroborated. "The chief wants you," he said. "It's about the 13th National Bank robbery." "All right," said Dolan calmly, and he held his hands out for the steel nippers. "Now, Mort," said Downey ingratiatingly, "you can save us a lot of trouble by telling us where the money is." "Doubtless I could," was the ambiguous response. Detective Downey looked him up and down and understood. Cunningham was called in from the alley. He and Downey remained in the apartment, and the other 2 men led Dolan away. In the natural course of events, the prisoner appeared before Detective Maurer at police headquarters. They were well acquainted professionally. Dolan told everything frankly, but the inception of the plan to the actual completion of the crime. The detective sat with his feet on his desk listening. At the end, he leaned forward towards the prisoner. "And where's the money?" he asked. Dolan paused long enough to roll a cigarette. "Well, it's my business," he responded pleasantly. "Well, you might as well tell us," insisted Detective Mallory. "We shall find it, of course, and it will save us trouble." "I'll just bet you have a hat and you don't find it," replied Dolan, and there was a glitter of triumph in his eyes. "On this level, between man and man now, I will bet you a hat that you never find that money." "You're on," replied Detective Mallory. He looked keenly at his prisoner, and his prisoner looked back without giving a quiver. "Did your wife get away with it?" From the question, Dolan surmised that she had not been arrested. "No," he answered. "Is it in your flat?" "Downey and Cunningham are searching for it right now," was the rejoinder. "They will report what they find." There was a silence for several minutes as the two men, officer and prisoner, stared at each other. When the thief takes refuge in a refusal to answer questions, he becomes a difficult subject to handle. There was the third degree, of course, but Dolan was the kind of man who would only laugh at that. The kind of man from whom anything less than physical torture could not bring a statement if he chose not to make it. Detective Mallory was perfectly aware of this dogged trait in the man's character. "It's this way, Chief," explained Dolan at last. "I robbed the bank, I got the money, and now it's where you'll never find it. I did it by myself, and I'm willing to take my medicine. Nobody helped me. My wife, I knew your men waited for her before they took me. My wife knows nothing on earth about it. She had no connection with the thing at all, and she can prove that. That's all I'm going to say. You might as well make up your mind to it." Detective Mallory's eyes snapped. "You will tell me where that money is," he blustered. Or I'll see that you get—" "20 years is the absolute limit," interrupted Dolan quietly. "I'll expect to get 20 years. That's the worst you can do to me." The detective stared at him hard. "And besides," Dolan went on, "I won't get lonesome when I get where I'm going. I've got lots of friends there. Been there before. One of the jailers is the best bridge player I've ever met." Like most men who find themselves balked at by the outset, Detective Mallory sought to appease his indignation by heaping invective upon the prisoner, by threats, by promises, by wheedling, by bluster. It was all the same. Dolan remained silent. Finally, he was led away and locked up. A few minutes later, Downey and Cunningham appeared. One glance told their chief that they could not enlighten him on the whereabouts of the stolen money. "Do you have any idea where it is?" he demanded. "No, but I've got a definite idea where it isn't," replied Dolan grimly. "It isn't in that flat. There's not one square inch of it that we didn't go over, not one object that we didn't tear up to pieces looking. It simply isn't there. He hid it somewhere before we got him." "Well, take all the men you want and keep at it," instructed Detective Mallory. "One of you, by the way, had better bring Dolan's wife. I'm fairly certain that she had nothing to do with it, but she might know something, and I can bluff a woman." Detective Mallory announced that accomplishment as if it were a thing to be proud of. "There's nothing to do now but to get the money. Meanwhile, I'll see that Dolan isn't permitted to communicate with anybody." "There's always a chance," suggested Downey, "that a man as clever as Dolan could, in a cipher letter or by some seemingly innocent remark, inform her where the money is if we assume she doesn't know, and that should be guarded against." "It will be guarded against," declared Detective Mallory emphatically. Dolan will not be permitted to see or talk to anyone for the present, not even a lawyer. He may weaken later on. But day succeeded day, and Dolan showed no signs of talking. His wife, meanwhile, had been apprehended and subjected to the third degree. When the ordeal was over, the net result was that Detective Mallory was convinced that she had had nothing whatsoever to do with the robbery, and had not been the faintest idea where the money was. Half a dozen times Dolan asked permission to see her or to write to her. Each time, the request was curtly refused. Newspapermen, with and without inspiration, had sought the money vainly, and the police were now seeking to trace the movements of Mort Dolan from the moment of the robbery until the moment of his appearance on the steps of the house where he lived. In this way, they hoped to get an inkling of where the money had been hidden, for the idea of the money being in the flat had been abandoned. Dolan simply would not say anything. Finally, one day, Hutcherson Hatch, reporter, made an exhaustive search of Dolan's flat for the fourth time, then went over to police headquarters to talk it over with Mallory. While the President Ashe and two directors of the victimized bank appeared, they were worried. "Is there any trace of the money?" asked Mr. Ashe. "Not yet," responded Dr. Mallory. "Well, could we talk to Dolan a few minutes?" "If we didn't get anything out of him, you won't," said the detective. "But it won't do any harm. Come along." Dolan did not seem particularly glad to see them. He came to the bars of his cell and peered through. It was only when Mr. Ashe was introduced to him as the president of the 13th National Bank that he seemed to take any interest in his visitors. The interest took the form of a grin. Mr. Ashe evidently had something of importance on his mind, and was seeking the happiest method of expression. Once or twice he spoke aside to his companions, and Dolan watched them curiously. At last, he turned to the prisoner. "You'll admit that you robbed the bank?" he asked. "There's no need denying it," replied Dolan. "Well," said Mr. Ashe, in a hesitated moment, "the board of directors has had a meeting this morning, and speaking on their behalf, I want to say something. If you will inform us of the whereabouts of the money, we will, upon its recovery, exert every effort within our power to have your sentence cut in half. In other words, as I understand it, you have given the police no trouble, you have confessed the crime, and this, with the return of the money, would wait for you when the sentence is pronounced. Say the maximum is 20 years. We might be able to get you off with 10 if we get the money." Detective Mallory looked doubtful. He realized, perhaps, the futility of such a promise, yet he was silent. The proposition might draw out something on which to proceed. "Can't see it," said Dolan at last. "It's this way. I'm 27 years old. I'll get 20 years. About 2 of that'll come off for good behavior, so we'll get 18. At the end of that time, I'll come out with $109,000 odd, rich for life, and able to retire 45 years. In other words, while I'm in prison, I'll be working for a good, stiff salary, something really worthwhile. Very few men are able to retire at 45. Mr. Ashe readily realized the truth of this statement. It was the point of the view of a man to whom mere prison has few terrors, a man content to remain immured for 20 years for a consideration. He turned and spoke aside to the two directors again. "But I'll tell you what I will do," said Dolan after a pause. "If you'll fix it so that I only get, say, 2 years, I'll give you half the money." There was silence. Detective Mallory strolled along the corridor beyond the view of the prisoner and summoned President Ashe to his side with a jerk of his head. "Agree to that," he said. "Perhaps he really will give up." "But it wouldn't be possible to arrange it, would it?" asked Mr. Ashe. Certainly not, said the detective, but agree to it. Get your money, if you can, and then we'll nail him anyhow. Mr. Ashe stared at him for a moment, vaguely indignant at the treachery of the thing. Then greed triumphed. He walked back to the cell. We agree to that, Mr. Dolan, he said briskly. Fix a 2-year sentence for you to return half the money. Dolan smiled a little. All right, go ahead, he said. When the sentence is 2 years is pronounced, and the first-class lawyer arranges it for me so that the matter can never be reopened, I'll tell you where you can get your half. But of course we must tell us that now, said Mr. Ashe. Dolan smiled cheerfully. It was a taunting, insinuating, accusing sort of smile, and it informed the bank president that the duplicity contemplated was discovered. Mr. Ashe was silent for a moment, and then blushed. Nothing doing, said Dolan, and he retired to a recess in his cell, and his interests in the matter were at an end. But we agreed. The money now, stammered Mr. Ashe. It was a large sum, and the theft has crippled us considerably. All right, said Dolan quickly. The sooner I get 2 years, the sooner you get it. How can it be fixed? I'll leave that to you. And that was all. The bank president and the 2 directors went out fuming impotently. Mr. Ashe paused in Detective Mallory's office long enough for a final word. Of course, it was brilliant work on the part of the police to capture Dolan, he said caustically, but it isn't doing us a particle of good. All I see now is that we lose $109,000. It looks very much like it, assented the detective. Unless we find it. Well, why don't you find it? Detective Mallory had to give it up. What did Dolan do with the money? Hutchinson Hatch was asking the Professor Von Dusen. The distinguished scientist and logistician was sitting with his head pillowed on a cushion, and with his squint eyes turned upward. It isn't in the flat. And Dolan's wife? Inquired the professor in his perpetually irritated voice. It seems conclusive that she has no idea where it is. She has been put through the 3rd degree, explained the reporter, and if she had known, she would probably have told. Is she living in the flat now? No, she's staying with her sister. The flat is under lock and key. Mallory has the key. He has shown the utmost care in everything he has done. Dolan has not been permitted to write or to see his wife for fear that he would let. He has not been permitted to communicate with anybody at all, not even his lawyer. He did see the President Ashe and 2 directors of the bank, but naturally he wouldn't give them a message for his wife. The professor was silent for 5, 10, 20 minutes, and he sat with the long, slender fingers pressed tip to tip, squinting unblinkingly at the ceiling. Hatch waited patiently. Of course, said the scientist at last. $109,000, even in large bills, would make a considerable bundle, and would be extremely difficult to hide in a place that has been gone over so often. We may suppose, therefore, that it isn't in the flat. What have the detectives learned as to Dolan's whereabouts after the robbery and before he was taken? Nothing, replied Hatch. Nothing absolutely. He seemed to disappear off the earth for a time. That time, I suppose, was when he was disposing of the money. His plans were evidently well laid. It would be possible, of course, by the simple rules of logic, to sit still here and ultimately locate the money, remarked the professor musingly. But it would take a long time. We might begin, for instance, with the idea of the contemplated flight. When? By rail or by steamer? The answers to those questions would, in a way, enlighten us as to the possible location of the money, because, remember, it would have to be placed where it was readily accessible in case of flight. But the process would be a long one. Perhaps it would be best to make Dolan tell us where he hid it. It would if he would tell, agreed the reporter, but he is reticent to a degree that is maddening where the money is mentioned. Naturally, remarked the scientist. That really doesn't matter. I have no doubt he will inform me. So Hatch and the professor called upon Detective Mallory. They found him in a deep abstraction. He glanced up from the intrusion with an appearance almost as a relief. He knew intuitively what it was. If you can find out where that money is, Professor, he declared emphatically, well, you can't. The professor squinted into the official's eyes thoughtfully, and the corners of his straight mouth were drawn down disapprovingly. I think perhaps there has been a little too much caution here, Mr. Mallory, he said. I have no doubt Dolan will inform me where the money is. As I understand it, his wife is practically without means. Yes, was the reply. She's living with her sister. And he has asked several times to be permitted to write or to see her. Oh, yes, dozens of times. Well, now suppose you do let him see her, suggested the professor. Lord, that's just what he wants, blurted the detective. If he sees her, I will know he will, in some way, by something he says, by a gesture, by a look, inform her where the money is. As it is now, I know she does not know where it is. Well, if he informs her, won't he also inform us? Demanded the professor. If Dolan wants to convey knowledge of the whereabouts to the money to let his wife let in and talk to her, let him give her the information. I will dare say that she is clever enough to interpret a spoken word as a clue to where the money is, and I am too. The detective thought it over. He knew this little crab scientist with the enormous head, and he knew, too, some of the amazing results he had achieved by methods wholly unlike those known by the police. But in this case, he was frankly in doubt. This way, the professor continued. Get his wife here, and let her pass Dolan's cell and speak to him, so that he will know that she is, and let her carry on the conversations with him while she is beyond his sight. Have a stenographer, without the knowledge of either, take down just what is said, word for word. Give me a transcript of the conversation, and hold on the wife to some pretext until I can study it a little. If he gives her a clue, I'll get the money. There was not the slightest trace of egotism in his irritable tones. It seemed merely a statement of fact. Detective Mallory, looking at the wizened face of the logistician, was doubtful beyond hopeful, and at last he consented to the experiment. The wife was sent for and came eagerly. A stenographer was placed in the cell adjoining Dolan's, and Mrs. Dolan was led along the corridor. She paused in front of Dolan's cell. He started towards her with an exclamation. Then she was led a little way out of sight. With face pressed close against the bars, Dolan glowered upon Detective Mallory and Hatch. An expression of awful ferocity leapt into his eyes. What are you doing with her? He demanded. Mort, she called. Belle, is that you? They told me you wanted to talk to me, she exclaimed. She was panting fiercely as she struggled to shake off the hands which held her beyond his sight. What sort of game is this, Mallory? Demanded the prisoner. You've wanted to talk to her, replied Mallory. Now go ahead. You may talk, but you must not see her. That's it, then, eh? Said Dolan. Why did you bring her for, then? Is she under arrest? Mort, came his wife's voice again. They won't let me come to see where I can see you. There was utter silence for a moment. Hatch was overpowered by a feeling that he was interrupting on a family tragedy, and tiptoed beyond reach of Dolan's roving eyes to where the professor was sitting on a stool, twiddling his fingers. After a moment, the detective joined them. Well, whispered Dora again. There was a whisper.
Don't say anything, Mort, she commanded. Cunningham and Blanton are holding me. The others are listening.
I don't want to say anything, said Dolan. I did want to see you. I want to know that you're getting along all right. Are you still at the flat?
No, I'm at my sister's, was the reply. I have no money, and I can't stay at the flat.
You know they're going to send me away.
Yes,
was almost instant sob in her voice.
I know it.
Then I'll get the limit. 20 years.
Yes.
Can you get along?
I will do something,
was the reply.
Oh, Mort, why?
Oh, never mind that, he interrupted impatiently. It doesn't do any good to regret things. It isn't what I planned, little girl, but it's here. So I'll meet it. I'll get a good behavior allowance. That'll save 2 years, and then... There was a menace in the tone which was not lost upon the listeners.
18 years,
he heard her moan. For one instant, Dolan's lips were pressed tightly together, and in that instant he had a regret. Regret that he had not killed Blanton and Cunningham rather than submit to capture. She took off his anger with an effort. I don't know if they'll permit me to ever see you, he said desperately. As long as I refuse to tell where the money is hidden, and I know they'll never permit me to write you for fear I'll tell you where it is. So suppose the goodbye will be like this. I'm sorry, little girl. He heard her weeping and hurled himself against the bars in a passion. It passed after a moment. He must not forget that she was penniless, and the money, that vast fortune. There's one more thing you need from me, Belle, he said calmly. This sort of thing doesn't do any good. Brace up, little girl, and wait. Wait for me. 18 years is not forever. We're both young, and... but never mind that. I wish you would please go up to the flat and... Do you remember my heavy brown coat?
Yes, the old one, she asked.
That's it, he answered. It's cold in here in the cell. Will you please go up to the flat when they let you loose and sew up that tear under my right arm and send it here to me? That's probably the last favor I'll ask for you for a long time. So, will you do it this afternoon?
Yes,
she answered tearfully. The tear is under the right arm, and be certain to sew it up, said Dolan again.
Perhaps when I'm tired, I shall give you a chance to see you.
The professor rose and stretched himself a little. That's all that's necessary, Mr. Mallory, he said. Have her held until I tell you to release her. Mallory made a motion to Cunningham and Blanton, and the woman was led away, screaming. Hutch shuddered a little, and Dolan, not understanding, flung himself against the bars of his cell like a caged animal. Clever, aren't you? He snarled as he caught sight of Detective Mallory. Thought I tried to tell her where it was, but I didn't, and you'll never know where it is, not in 1,000 years. Accompanied by the professor and Hatch, the detective went back to his private office. All were silent, and the detective glanced from time to time into the eyes of the scientist. Now, Mr. Hatch, we have the whereabouts of the money settled, said the professor quietly. Please go at once to the flat and bring the brown coat Dolan mentioned. Dare I say the secret of the hidden money is somewhere in that coat. But 2 of my men have already searched the coat, protested the detective. That doesn't make it less difference, snapped the scientist. The reporter went without a word. Half an hour later, he returned with the brown coat. It was a commonplace-looking garment, badly worn and in sad need of repair. Not only in the tear under the arm, but in other places. When he saw the professor nodded his head abruptly, as if he had just what he expected. Money can't be in that. "I'll bet my head on it," declared the Detective Malloy flatly. "There isn't room for it." The thinking machine gave him a glance in which there was a touch of pity. "We know," he said, "that the money isn't in the coat, but you can't see that they're perfectly possible that a slip of paper on which no one has written down the hiding place of the money can be hidden somewhere in it. Can't you see that he asked for the coat, which is not a good one, a coat that is the coat he's wearing now, in order to attract his wife's attention to it?" Then, seam by seam, the brown coat was taken to pieces. Each piece in turn was submitted to the sharpest scrutiny. Nothing resulted. Detective Mallory frankly regarded it all as a wasted effort, and when there remained nothing of the coat save strip cloths and lining that was inclined to be triumphant, then the professor was merely thoughtful. "It went further back than that," the scientist mused. Some tiny wrinkles appeared in his dome-like brow. "Ah, Mr. Hatch, please go back to the flat. Look in the sewing machine drawers or work baskets, and you will find the spots of brown thread. Bring it to me." "How do you know there's a spool of brown thread there?" said the detective. "I know it because Mr. Hatch will bring it back to me," snapped the professor. "I know it by the simplest logic and most rudimentary rules of logic." Hatch went out again. In half an hour he returned with the spool of brown thread. Professor Von Dusen's white fingers closed on it eagerly, and his watery squint eyes examined it. A portion of it had been used. The spool was only half gone. But he noted, as he did, his eyes reflected the glitter of triumph. He noticed that a paper scrap on each end was still in place. "Now, Mr. Mallory," he said, "I'll demonstrate to you that in Dolan the police are dealing with a man far beyond the ordinary bank thief. In his way, he's a genius. Look here." With a penknife, he ripped off the paper caps, and then looked through the hole in the spool. For an instant his face showed blank amazement. Then he put the spool down on the table and squinted at it for a moment in absolute silence. "It must be here," he said at last. "It must be. Why else did he choose—" "Of course." With the quick fingers he began to unwind the thread. Yard after yard it rolled off from his hand, and finally the mass of brown on the spool appeared a white strip. In another instant the thinking machine held it in his tiny hand. Thin sheet of paper. A cigarette paper. It had been wound around the spool, and the thread wound over it so smoothly that it was impossible to see that it had ever been removed. The detective and Hatch were leaning over his shoulder, curiously watching him. The tiny paper unfolded. Something was written on it. Slowly, the professor deciphered it. 47 Causeway Street, basement, 10th flagstone from northeast corner. And there the money was found. 109,437. The house was unoccupied, and within easy reach of the wharf from which the European-bound steamer sailed. Within half an hour of sailing time, it would have been an easy matter for Dolan to recover it all, and that without in the least expecting the suspicion of him those who might have been watching him. For a saloon next door opened into an alley behind, and a broken window in the basement gave quick access to the treasure. Dolan reasoned, the professor explained, that even if he was never permitted to see his wife, she would probably use that thread and in time find the directions for recovering the money. Further, he argued that the police would never suspect that a spool contained a secret for which they sought so long. His conversation with his wife today was merely to draw her attention to something which would have required her to use the spool of brown thread. The brown coat was all that he could think of, and that's all, I think. Dolan was sadly surprised when the news of the recovery of the money was broken to him, but a certain quaint philosophy did not desert him. He gazed at Detective Mallory incredulously, and as the story was told, at the end he went over and sat down in his cell cot. "Well, Chief," he said, "I didn't think it was you." That makes me owe you a hat.